Um, I'd like to introduce our next speaker as Paul Finucanes, who's Chief Academic Officer at the UL Group of Hospitals, and previously was Foundation Head of UL's Graduate Entry School. You'll have seen his impressive biopic, and the interesting fact to note is that he's also co-authored two books on art and was Limerick Person of the Year in 2007. So,
it's a raffle, Jerry.
Yes, a successful winner in the raffle. So we look forward to Paul's talk.
Good. Thanks very much, and thank you for the invitation to be here this morning. What I plan to do over the next 20 minutes, and Jerry has said he'll enforce the time fairly rigorously, so I'm kind of being careful, is just explain to people who might not know how the hospital groups have been established in the last while. And then to talk about how academic activity has stimulated major health service development in one of the groups, and obviously I'm going to choose the one that I've been associated with for the last 12 months, that's the UL Hospitals Group. And then to go beyond the local, to have a look at what's happening nationally, to acknowledge in the course of all of this that there are ongoing challenges, of course, in relation to clinical research. And then the final slide, or the final bit, which I'll try to emphasise, is that currently there's a window of opportunity, and I'll re-stress those words, a window of opportunity, which needs to be exploited, in my opinion. So that's the plan for the session. So to get right into it, the reorganisation of health services nationally, and again, it might be useful just to look at this historically over the 100-odd years since the foundation of the state. And back in the day, in 1922, the idea was to have a county hospital in each of the counties in the country, so 27 counties, which looked after acute hospital services and the dispensary system. This, of course, is what's left us with the legacy of a hospital, if not at every crossroads, but then a hospital in every county, and funded by rates, so by the local authority and also by the Irish Hospital Sweepstake, if any of us are old enough to remember that. Then a reorganisation in 1970 with the formation of the health boards, and many of us will have lived through the times of the health boards, and this was funding from central government for the first time. And then in 2005 with the formation of the HSE, 4 regions that were developed, and again with funding from central government. And then in 2013 with the decision to realign things into 7 hospital groups, the 6 that you'll see coloured there, and then the 7th being the National Children's Hospital, and funding that the expectation is in time will come through universal health insurance, but there's a question mark, as you can see over that. And again, interesting that for the first time, these hospital groups cover acute hospital services only, and there's a separate system for community health services. So that's the reorganisation. And one of the things that's come out of this reorganisation is an alignment with each of the 6, 7 to be networks or hospital groups with an academic partner, and you can see there who the academic partners are. In our case in the Midwest, with the University of Limerick, obviously, so geographical association clearly made sense. Jerry belongs to the Celtic group and their alliance with the with NUI Galway. So that's and again, I suppose some people at least would have asked, well, what's the importance of an alignment between the health service at a regional level and an academic partner? And, you know, one kind of wet morning, I kind of got an envelope and did a bit of doodling and, you know, came up with a few kind of ideas. I'm sure, given a bit of time, most people here in the audience could come up with a better list of things than that. But you can see how the things are interconnected. So, for example, you know, up at the top left, there's this idea that it's easier to recruit high-quality staff. Down bottom right is the idea of more innovation. And of course, those two things are inextricably linked. And when you start joining all these up, what I think you have is a rising tide that's floating the ship, and the ship, of course, is better patient care. So that's the theory behind it all, that all this kind of academic activity energizes the whole kind of environment, resulting in better patient care. Well, that's the rhetoric. Does it happen? So what I want to do is to try and persuade you that at a local level it certainly has happened in Limerick. And there's a competition here, and what I want you to do is to guess the year. So I want to talk about the predecessor of University Hospital Limerick, which was the Midwestern Regional Hospital. And the year in question, and I want you to guess at the latest year in which this information held. So there were 6 physicians, and I can't focus just on consultants, but I mean you could look at many other parameters. 3 generalists, 2 geriatricians, 1 cardiologist. There were 4 surgeons, 3 generalists, 1 urologist, 4 paediatricians, neonatologists, 3 radiographers, 2 pathologists, etc., etc. Now, Niamh has helped me in the interval to source. We were hoping for a chocolate frog, but the local spar shop didn't run to a chocolate frog, but I've been reliably informed that this is a very good substitute. So there's a prize for... So who wants to shout out? And Niamh, in the event of a tiebreaker, Niamh will be the judge. 2013? Too high? Sorry? Later than that? Sorry, what am I saying? So earlier than that. Earlier than that. Earlier than that. Earlier than that. Getting close.
99.
Very close.
95.
Who said 99? It's actually 2000, which is just 15 years ago. So what's it like today? 39 consultant physicians, so gone up from 6 in 15 years. The number of surgeons has gone up to 30, 13 paediatricians, neonatologists, etc., etc., etc. I think that's extraordinary. I'm not sure if you'd share that view, but I mean, you know, just in the space of 15 years. Current physical developments, just to go through them quickly. A new intensive care unit built in 2013, extraordinary facility, just state of the art, doesn't even come close to describing it. With that HDU and a cardiology suite, all in the critical care block. CF unit that opened yesterday, stroke unit that's opening next week, breast unit and the dermatology unit both opening in 2016. Clinical Education and Research Centre, Sue alluded to the lack of it, Susan, that'll be happening in September 2016. The new emergency department, the frame of the shell is there, but it will be fitted out by 2017. And a new maternity hospital, which will come on site in 2020. So an extraordinary level of physical development that's happened, you know, again, over a short period of time. Now, I think that Limerick is atypical. I think Limerick was well behind the pack, and what has happened there has been a kind of a catch-up to a large extent, but it has happened. But what I now want to do is go beyond the local and parochial and maybe to look what's happening at a national level. Oh, sorry, let me just, before I do that, talk about academic activity, because what I've talked about so far has really been clinically orientated. So again, if you reflect back to as recent as 2007, when the medical school in UL was established, so sorry again about reflecting on my own experience, but there was very little education and training activity happening in the Midwest. Certainly there was clinical placements for nursing students in the School of Nursing at UL. And there were a few UCC medical students who would come, what I call, on safari from UCC. In other words, that the proper education happened in Cork, but they were sent out to the sticks to places like Limerick just to kind of see how the natives kind of behaved. And, you know, they came and spent a couple of weeks, spent the first few days kind of getting an orientation, the last few days ready to move on to the next place, and a few days in the middle where they might or might not have had some educational experience. Pretty much no undergraduate training in the clinical therapies. And postgraduate education and training was a bit ad hoc. Now that's changed dramatically again in the last 8 years. We now have 120 UL medical students at any one time in UL hospitals, and incidentally, there's a formula whereby there's 10,000 per student per year paid in to support clinical training on the clinical side, so that generates 1.2 million annually to support clinical training on the site, and that's going to expand to 150 students with 1.5 million of income over time. Progress with other health disciplines as well, not just nursing, but the clinical therapy. It's still work to do there, but it's happening. And significant advances in postgraduate education and training. Just stop for a drink of water. The same kind of thing is happening in terms of research and innovation, but not as quickly. There is, I think, a lag phase. The education and training always gets up and running much earlier than the research, and I think that's kind of par for the course. But in 2007, there was some research activity in the Midwestern Regional Hospital with a few clinicians who managed to maintain some kind of a research profile, despite rather than because of the system. And that's now changing. I use the word changing rather than has changed, because it is a process. UL has established a health research institute. Part and parcel of that is a joint venture with the HSE to establish a clinical research unit on site within the hospital group. And this clinical research centre that I talked about is being built as we speak and will be up and running by September 2016. And as well as the structure, there is also a process with clinical research developing a structure, a focus and a direction, leadership, all of these things. So I have no doubt but that clinical research on the clinical site is on its way. This hasn't really happened just by accident. And back in 2013, the new hospital group set up to develop a strategic plan and decided that it would focus just on 4 things that it wanted to deliver on over the 3-year period of the 2014-2016 strategic plan. The first had to do with the establishment of a genuine hospital network from 6 previously autonomous facilities, and that was a big challenge. The second was to ensure good quality patient care. That's priority B. C was to develop the ICT on site, which is pretty awful. And then the fourth one I've highlighted and put it in bold. And I'll read it. I mean, you can read it yourselves. Why don't I take a drink of water and let you to read D, which is the fourth strategic priority. So the idea of becoming a major national centre for education and research. And just to say how we decided that we'd implement strategic priority B, because each of those priorities had an implementation plan. So one was the appointment of a chief academic officer, that's me on an interim basis. The academic appointments and linkages is seen to be crucially important in terms of developing this priority. Developing the educational profile, which I won't speak about, and developing the research profile of UL, which I will talk about, because the ways in which we decided, or it was decided, that the research profile of UL hospitals would be developed was by bringing together existing resources, in other words, trying to harness the what was already in place, empowering the CRU, the Clinical Research Unit, to take primary responsibility for the planning and coordination of research, working with the Health Research Institute at UL, so again this link with the academic partner, to develop the CRU across UL hospitals and the other affiliated sites. And then finally, we have, as I've said, a new clinical education and research centre coming on board in 2016. That's a 4-storey facility, but it has been future-proofed in that the foundations of the building, things like the stairwells, the lift shafts, have all been designed to support a 6-storey building. And the plan is to add 2 additional floors to that building, and those 2 floors will be for research. So of the building that will be there in 2016, 1.5 of the 4 floors will be for research. Ultimately, it's going to be 3.5 of the 6 stories that will be, or the 6 floors that will be for research. So a very definite plan. So what I want to summarise in this bit is that at a local level, in my opinion, an academic focus in terms of education and training, research and innovation in health is being paralleled by what I would say is a dramatic improvement in the range and quality of patient services. So back to that initial slide with the arrows kind of going hither and thither. Is it a cause and effect? You could argue that. I have no doubt, absolutely no doubt in my mind, but there is a cause and effect. I don't think we'd be anywhere near where we are in Limerick at the moment if it wasn't for the academic developments that have happened over the last 10 or 15 years. I think, that to me is so self-evident. And then the next thing I want to ask, is it a local phenomenon? Well, I think that it might be exaggerated in Limerick, but it's not just local. And I want to reflect back to Bernie Hannigan's report from 2014, where she identified 5 recurring themes in clinical research at the moment. She talked about, well, you can see the 5 things there. I just want to pick up on a few of those in the next few slides. I want to talk about the infrastructure at a national level. I want to talk about doing research at a national level, using research, and then briefly, because I'm on kind of the thinnest of ice with that, to talk briefly about research careers, realising that there are people in the audience much better than I at talking about that. So the enabling infrastructure, if we do want to talk about concrete and bricks and mortar, we can see that each of the 6 existing hospital groups now have, or will soon have, a physical facility to support research. Started in Beaumont in 2000 with their clinical research facility, and then in UCD, and you can see there yourselves the years in which these things have happened. So 2000, 2006, 2011, 2013, 2015, the fantastic facility in Galway, and 2016, what we'll have in UL. So again, over a short period of time, a dramatic advance in terms of what is available in terms of bricks and mortar. Money, yeah, there is some. 150 million annually. This is a slide I got from Graham Love at a conference a couple of weeks ago, where he's estimated there's 150 million being spent annually in health research if you take all the kind of pockets and add it together. He pointed out that this amounts to just 1.1% of the 13 billion that's spent on health, and I think made a valid comment that this is less than what you would expect, what other jurisdictions spend, what industry spends on research and development, but at least, there is that there, so it's a base on which to build. And the HRB, 200 million over the 5-year period, 2010-2014, and of course, access to money outside of national money in terms of things like EU and Horizon 2020 and what have you. And this is a slide that Graham has allowed me to show, and I won't talk to it because it's Graham's slide, except to say that there is a focus in terms of research for the next 5 years. This covers a period 2016 to 2020, and the HRB plans to invest 235 million in health research, 50% of which is already committed, and there are enabling strategies and there is underpinning support, that dimension to it. So again, Graham's slide that I won't talk to, but just to make the point that there is a plan and there is funding and there will be increased funding, but probably not enough. Another important development, I think, is the Clinical Research Coordination Ireland, which has recently been established in May of this year. And this has been established to integrate clinical research facilities, the 5, 6 that are now kind of on board, co-funded by the HRB, by Enterprise Ireland and by Molecular Medicine Ireland, and starting to engage with hospital groups and industry. And I'm not sure if anybody in the audience was at the meeting that I was at in Athlone a couple of weeks ago, which actually was organised by the HSE and convened by the HSE CEOs. And they brought the HRB and other funding bodies along, and also industry in great numbers. And the idea was to see how we could brainstorm the promotion of clinical research on clinical sites. And I think the important thing there is that the meeting was convened, coordinated by the HSE. And I think, to think 5 years ago of something like that happening was pretty much unimaginable. The landscape for doing research, again, extraordinary examples. I've just picked one. There must be many, many more. I know what is happening up in Galway in terms of remedy and translational research is another thing that we could have used as an alternative. But what the APC Microbiome Institute in UCC have been able to do over a short few years, established in 2003, currently have 160 researchers, 70 million in funding that they have identified for between 2013 and 2019. An example of what can be achieved if there are enough people with vision and with energy, and that's, I think, the essential ingredients. Everything else is incidental. Funding is incidental. Vision, energy, those are the things that are needed time and time again in research as in other areas. The landscape for using research, and again, this is not original, this is what has been highlighted by others, but just to say that I concur with it, that there has been the perception, and I think an accurate perception, that researchers are on Mars and those who have the ability to avail of the outcome of research are on Venus, and they're the twain kind of meet, or if they do, it's kind of almost by accident. But I think that's changing, and again, evidence of that, for example, that meeting in Athlone, which was designed to bring those doing research and those with the potential to use research together, and I think that's the kind of thing that we need to see much more of. And the three-legged stool, again, people would have seen that in terms of health service delivery, what you need is obviously clinical care, which is one leg of the stool, education and training a second leg, research and innovation a third leg, and if any one leg of the three-legged stool is missing, well then the stool isn't hugely effective, and I think that that's the model that we need to have, and I think that's the model that increasingly the HSE, who perhaps fairly recently wouldn't have understood quite what education and training, research and innovation had to offer, I think now have an understanding and are keen to become involved in strengthening the delivery of health services through academic activities. Thin ice, so I'll kind of see if I can skim over it without, making a hymns of it, but what Bernie Hannigan said in her report of 2014 is there in bold and in italics, and again it's been alluded to today about the whole, particularly following an early stage PhD career. And the interesting paper by Conor O'Carroll, and two of the, I think, 4 or 5 discussion points that Conor had in that paper has to do with, do the universities, hospitals seek only to minimise the risk of CIDs, and this shapes institutional policy for research careers. I think it's an interesting question. I don't know if I have an answer to it. I can talk about my experience in Limerick, and we have a fantastic CEO at the moment in Professor Colette Cowan. I know that she is hugely committed to academic activity and sees that this is very important to the development of the institution. I think she would love to be in a position to provide more direct funding to support research. I think her hands are tied, as are the hands of CEOs. I think competing priorities, the chock-a-block, people on trolleys, the media waiting to, pronounce judgment. And I think in that context, it's difficult to say, well, we're going to employ, another researcher, 2 researchers, 5 researchers, set up a research facility. So I think what we need to do is to help HSE managers to create a different climate so that everybody understands the importance of academic activities to empower people to develop that. That's my take on it, but I haven't articulated that very well, but there might be a chance to tease it out a bit further in questions. And the other question that Conor had is lack of support by the HSE for research negatively impacting patient care. Rhetorical question. I mean, I think I'd rephrase it differently and phrase it in the positive. I think there is an increasing awareness by the HSE that investment in academic activity, including research and innovation, has the potential to enhance patient care, and I think that's the slant we should take at it. How am I doing, Jerry? Am I? Yeah. Right, okay, so there's 2 or 3 slides, I think, to go. So, a concluding slide, and the icon on the right is that, I think I might be accused of using rose-tinted glasses or even rose-covered glasses for it, but I think the landscape for clinical research is quite positive. The new physical facilities that I've alluded to across all the hospital groups, ring-fence funding, maybe not enough, but at least some, and an opportunity to expand on it. More coordinated approach at a local and national level, I see. Links with industry being strengthened. I think we're only starting to see that, and I think that's something that there has to be a far, far, far greater push on. There has been, in my view, a notion in certain parties that industry is something kind of that's a bit smelly and a bit kind of needs to be. You need to keep a distance in case you become contaminated. I think that's so wrong, and I think other countries where they haven't got that mentality have prospered and thrived through links with industry. I think industry are desperately looking to engage in clinical research, and I think are constantly frustrated by the difficulty in engaging in clinical research in Ireland, much more than in other countries, and I think that's a challenge for all of us. More active engagement by the HSE, supported by formal links to academic partners. We've been through that. Realisation that academic activity is a powerful driver of enhanced service provision. So, yeah. And the final sentence there I just want to talk about, and I want to mention the phrase a window of opportunity, because I do think that there is an opportunity there at the moment which might not continue indefinitely. There is a reorganisation of health services. There is the formation of new hospital groups. There is the notion that these will move to trust status with autonomy, all of that. I think maybe by accident, I'm not sure, but there is within the HSE at the highest level, as I see it, a real understanding of the benefits of academia, a strong wish to embrace the academic partner and create links nationally, even internationally. And it just all seems a bit too good to be true, and you just wonder if it's going to be sustained. So if some crisis happens in health, or a series of crises happens in health, whether this is now going to be put on the back burner. So I think we should seize the opportunity. That's really the message I want to get across above all else today, and say that perhaps over the next short while, how long? Maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 5 years, that we can really change the climate, put academic activity, education and training, research and innovation on the agenda, and make it easier for the crop of CEOs and others that we have at the helm of the moment to embrace the opportunity. So, in summary, what I tried to deal with in this presentation was how hospital groups have been established, then the parochial thing of how academic activity has had an extraordinary impact in where I work, that I think that similar things are happening at a national level, acknowledge the ongoing challenges, and then highlight the window of opportunity. So that's what I have to say. So thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Paul. Whistle-stop tour.
Yeah.
We have time for a couple of questions. If anybody would like to raise any issues, ready to... Good.
Thanks very much. Robert O'Connor is my name, Head of Research for the Irish Cancer Society. Just interested in the financial kind of drivers or the financial context to doing this. Because clearly if you undertake a new activity, you have to fund it.
Yeah.
And the health budget has been regarded, certainly by our international overlords, as a very significant liability in this country, where most people personally regard their health as an asset. So where's the money going to come from for the necessary change that would drive that? Otherwise we will end up with people ending in posts that don't have teams or don't have resources to do the things. They will go into those posts. They'll get browned off fairly quickly. And as you say, the window will dissipate and disappear. Do you see that money coming through the system?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things. I think, first of all, there's the size of the cake, and then secondly, the way the cake is sliced. And I think the two things are quite separate, and there have been and are likely to be continuing constraints in terms of increasing the size of the cake. I think what might be much more amenable to change is the way the cake is sliced. And I think the realisation that academic activity, education and training, and I don't want to in any shape or form underestimate the importance that I know the focus of this whole thing is on research and innovation. I think, back to the three-legged stool, that education and training is as integral to research and innovation as it is to clinical care. But I think what we need to try and do is argue for the cake to be sliced differently so that a greater proportion of it, more than the 1.1% that currently of the 13 billion. 13 billion is a vast amount of money. Surely, if we went up to 1.5%, if we went up to 1.6%, to 2%. And again, it's going to be a gradual thing. I don't think that any government is going to come along and say they're going to double the expenditure on health research in the next budget. That's never going to happen. But I think incrementally it can be a little bit. And of course, it doesn't all have to come from central government. Industry has to be part of this. Philanthropy has to be part of this. So there are other ways other than always looking to central government to fund research.
Okay, thanks very much.
Great.
You're off the
Thank you.
hook.
Off the hook. Thank you, sir.